When we think about democracy, we often think of a system where multiple voices and perspectives are represented, where citizens have a wide range of choices at the ballot box. But in the United States, despite being one of the world's oldest democracies, the political system has largely boiled down to just two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. This has led to what some call a duopoly, where these two parties dominate virtually every aspect of American political life. But how did this come to be? And what impact does this two-party dominance have on American democracy? First, let's take a look at the historical roots of this system. The United States has not always been a two-party nation. In fact, the framers of the Constitution didn't even mention political parties in the original document. Early on, American politics was more fluid, with multiple parties forming and dissolving. But by the mid-1800s, the system began to crystallize around two major factions, the Democrats and the Whigs. However, the Whigs eventually collapsed, and the Republican Party emerged in the 1850s, largely in opposition to the expansion of slavery. Since then, the political landscape in the U.S. has been dominated by these two parties, with very few exceptions. One of the reasons the two-party system has persisted is due to the structure of American elections. The U.S. uses a first-past-the-post, or winner-takes-all electoral system, which means that whichever candidate gets the most votes in an election wins the entire seat or office regardless of whether they received a majority of votes. This system naturally favors larger, well-established parties because voters are often reluctant to waste their vote on a third-party candidate who has little chance of winning. In contrast, many other countries with more diverse political systems use proportional representation, where seats in the legislature are allocated based on the percentage of votes each party receives, encouraging more parties to participate and giving smaller parties a chance to influence governance. In this system, third-party candidates in the U.S. face enormous challenges. Despite a few notable exceptions, such as Ross Perot's strong performance in the 1992 presidential election or Ralph Nader's run in 2000, third-party candidates rarely win a significant share of the vote. In 2020, for example, over 98% of votes in the presidential election went to either the Democratic or Republican candidate. Even when third-party candidates do manage to gain traction, they often find themselves marginalized by the media, locked out of debates, and without access to the vast financial and organizational resources that the two major parties enjoy. This leads to another factor that reinforces the duopoly: money. Running for office in the United States is incredibly expensive. In the 2020 election cycle, it's estimated that over $14 billion was spent on federal elections, with the vast majority of that money going to the Democratic and Republican parties and their candidates. The cost of running a competitive campaign, especially for higher offices like the presidency or a Senate seat, requires enormous fundraising capabilities. Both major parties have built extensive fundraising networks over the years, making it nearly impossible for third-party candidates to compete financially. Even at the state and local levels, candidates from outside the two-party system struggle to raise the funds needed for widespread advertising, organizing, and outreach. Money in politics is further compounded by corporate and political action committee (PAC) donations, which tend to flow overwhelmingly toward candidates from the two major parties. These donations often come with strings attached, as donors expect politicians to advance policies favorable to their interests. This creates an environment where elected officials are incentivized to align with the Democratic or Republican establishment, and third-party candidates who challenge the status quo often find themselves locked out of the financial system that powers modern campaigns. In addition to financial dominance, the two-party system is deeply ingrained in the legal and electoral frameworks of the United States. Ballot access laws, for example, make it extremely difficult for third-party candidates to even appear on the ballot in many states. In some states, third-party candidates are required to gather tens of thousands of signatures to qualify for the ballot, while Democratic and Republican candidates are automatically included if they win their party's primary. This creates a significant barrier to entry for any candidate who is not affiliated with one of the two major parties. Debate participation is another tool that reinforces the duopoly. Presidential debates are organized by the Commission on Presidential Debates, CPD, a private organization controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. The CPD sets stringent criteria for debate participation, requiring candidates to poll at 15% or higher in national surveys to be included. For third-party candidates, who often lack the resources and media coverage needed to achieve this threshold, This effectively shuts them out of one of the most important platforms for reaching voters. Without the ability to participate in debates, third-party candidates struggle to gain the visibility needed to mount a viable campaign. This two-party dominance has significant consequences for American democracy. One of the most obvious effects is the polarization of the political system. Because there are only two major parties, voters are often forced to choose between candidates who may not fully represent their views. This has led to an increasingly polarized electorate, where voters feel they must support one party out of opposition to the other, rather than out of enthusiasm for the candidate or platform. In recent years, this polarization has intensified, with partisan divisions deepening on issues ranging from healthcare to climate change to immigration. The result is a political system where compromise and collaboration are rare, and gridlock often prevails. The dominance of the two major parties also limits the diversity of perspectives in the political arena. While the Democratic and Republican parties do represent broad coalitions of voters, many Americans feel that their voices are not fully heard by either party. Polls consistently show that a significant portion of the electorate, sometimes as high as 60%, believes the country would be better off with more than two major political parties. Yet the structural barriers to third-party success remain high, leaving many voters disillusioned with the limited choices they face at the ballot box. Another consequence of the two-party system is the lack of accountability. Because elections in the U.S. are often framed as a binary choice between Democrats and Republicans, voters may feel compelled to vote for the lesser of two evils, rather than holding candidates accountable for their policies or performance. This dynamic discourages voters from exploring alternative viewpoints or supporting third-party candidates, even when they are dissatisfied with the major party options. Over time, this can lead to a sense of complacency within the major parties, as they know they will face little serious competition from outside their ranks. Despite these challenges, there have been efforts to break the duopoly in American politics. Movements advocating for electoral reforms like ranked choice voting, RCV, and proportional representation have gained traction in some states. Ranked choice voting allows voters to rank candidates in order of preference, which reduces the wasted vote problem and gives third-party candidates a better shot at success. In 2020, Maine became the first state to use RCV in a presidential election, and other states are considering similar reforms. However, these changes face stiff opposition from the two major parties, who benefit from the current system and are unlikely to support reforms that would weaken their dominance. In conclusion, the two-party system in the United States is deeply entrenched, supported by the electoral system, financial structures, legal barriers, and media coverage. While it has provided stability in some respects, it has also led to increased polarization, limited voter choice, and reduced accountability. As dissatisfaction with the system grows, efforts to reform the political landscape and challenge the duopoly may continue to gain momentum. But breaking the stranglehold of the Democratic and Republican parties will require significant changes to the way American elections are run. Until then, the two-party dominance in American politics will likely continue to shape the nation's future.